Greetings, fellow travelers. The world as we know it is crisscrossed by invisible lines, lines of power, lines of ancient knowledge. But where did this idea come from? Our story begins not with extraterrestrials, not yet, but with a man named Alfred Watkins. He was an amateur archaeologist, a photographer living in Hereford, England. The year was 1921, a pivotal year. Watkins was born on January 27, 1855, into a family known for its local businesses. He wasn't just a businessman, he was a craftsman, his eyes trained by years of landscape photography. Did this unique perspective allow him to see what others could not? I believe so. He was looking for something, perhaps without even knowing it. It was a summer day, June 30th, 1921 to be exact. Watkins stood on a hill in a place called Blackwadine. He wasn't just admiring the view. He was looking at a map, a simple map of the local area. But then, something extraordinary happened. He noticed a pattern, a straight line. Not just one, but several ancient sites, all perfectly aligned. Could this be mere coincidence? Or was it evidence of something far more profound? A forgotten system deliberately laid out by our ancestors. He had to know more. This was not just a casual observation. It was a revelation. A sudden understanding that would change his life and spark a debate that continues to this day. Watkins didn't just stop at one observation. Oh no. He climbed other hills. He consulted more maps. He confirmed his initial findings. Again and again, these ancient markers, standing stones, old churches, built on even older sacred mounds, prehistoric earthworks, ancient trackways, they all lined up. Perfectly straight lines, stretching for miles across the landscape. He called these alignments leys, later known as Ley Lines. He believed he had stumbled upon a lost system, a secret of the ancient Britons, a secret that had been hidden in plain sight for centuries, waiting for someone with the eyes to see. The question is, what were these lines for? This was not just a random scattering of ancient sites, as mainstream archaeology might have you believe. This was a network, a deliberate, intelligently designed network. Watkins was convinced. He had found something monumental. He proposed that these were not just any alignments, but remnants of a vast system of prehistoric pathways, paths used by our ancestors for trade, for travel, for communication. Imagine ancient people navigating the dense forests and rolling hills of Britain, not by meandering trails, but by these direct, straight tracks. Could it be that their understanding of landscape and geometry was far more advanced than we give them credit for? Ancient astronaut theorists say yes. So Alfred Watkins had his leys. But what did he think they truly represented? He wasn't initially thinking of mystical energies or UFO landing strips. Not at all. His theory was at first remarkably practical. He proposed that these ley lines were the remnants of ancient trading routes. Straight pathways, deliberately created by prehistoric societies in England. Think about it. In a time before modern roads, before GPS, how would you navigate? How would you ensure the most efficient route from one point to another, especially through challenging terrain? Watkins believed our ancestors were far from primitive. They were sophisticated surveyors and engineers. He theorized that these lines connected important landmarks. Not just any landmarks, but sites of significance, prehistoric hill forts, ancient burial mounds, sacred groves, and even old churches, which were often built upon even older pagan sites. Could it be that these Christian sites were deliberately placed to co-opt the existing power spots of the ancient world? Watkins believed these straight tracks were used for quicker travel, for moving goods, for connecting communities. He even speculated that by following these invisible lines, one might discover previously unmapped sites, perhaps ancient trenches, hidden forest glades, or notches deliberately cut into distant hills to serve as sighting points. Imagine ancient traders carrying their wares, following these precise alignments. They would look for a notch on a distant hilltop, a prominent standing stone, or a distinctive tree, all lined up to guide their way. This was a landscape encoded with information. A living map. Watkins published his ideas in his book, The Old Straight Track, in 1925. He provided numerous examples, meticulously documented with photographs and map references. He painted a picture of a highly organized prehistoric society, masters of their environment, a society that understood the importance of direct, efficient travel. Was this the beginning of a global positioning system, created by ancient minds? Watkins envisioned these routes as being marked by what he called mark stones or mark trees. These would be prominent features in the landscape, either natural or man-made, that served as wayfinders. He suggested that the word ley itself derived from an Old English word meaning a clearing in a wood, implying these paths were kept clear for travel. This was a system, he argued, that predated the Romans, perhaps by millennia. A testament to the ingenuity of the Neolithic and Bronze Age peoples. But was this practical vision of ancient superhighways too simple, or perhaps too revolutionary for its time? The academic world would soon weigh in. Alfred Watkins presented his theory with passion and detailed observation. He believed he had uncovered a forgotten truth about ancient Britain. But how did the academic establishment, the archaeologists and historians of the day, react to his old straight track? Well, many dismissed it outright. They argued that Watkins' hypothesis of perfectly straight trading routes was simply impractical. Think about the terrain of Britain, the hills, the valleys, the forests, the marshes. Would ancient traders really choose to struggle up a steep incline in a perfectly straight line when a gentler, winding path around it would be far easier? The critics pointed out that there was little to no hard archaeological evidence for these perfectly straight, paved, or even consistently maintained tracks. Where were the remnants of these ancient highways? While Watkins pointed to alignments of sites, the physical evidence of the paths themselves was often lacking or open to interpretation. Mainstream archaeology preferred to see ancient trackways as more organic, following the natural contours of the land, developing over time through repeated use rather than being surveyed and laid out with such rigid precision. The idea of prehistoric people possessing such advanced surveying skills was, for many, a step too far. Furthermore, some argued that with a high enough density of ancient sites on a map, it would be possible to find apparent alignments purely by chance. If you scatter enough dots on a piece of paper, you can always draw lines connecting some of them. Was Watkins simply seeing patterns where none truly existed? A victim of confirmation bias? This became a common critique. The idea that these alignments were intentional and part of a vast interconnected system seemed too fantastic for many scholars who were grounded in more conventional interpretations of prehistoric life. They saw Watkins as an enthusiastic amateur, perhaps, but not someone whose theories could rewrite history. Despite Watkins' meticulous fieldwork and his engaging presentation, his theory of ley lines as ancient trade routes largely failed to gain widespread acceptance within the archaeological community during his lifetime. It remained a fringe idea, championed by a dedicated few, but mostly ignored, or politely dismissed by the mainstream. They saw it as an oversimplification of complex settlement patterns and trade networks. The perceived impracticality of these straight lines for everyday travel was a major stumbling block. Little did anyone know that Watkins's ideas, though initially sidelined, were destined for a dramatic and rather unexpected revival decades later, taking them in a direction he himself likely never envisioned. Decades passed. Alfred Watkins's theory of ley lines as ancient trade routes had faded somewhat into the background, a curious but largely unaccepted notion. Then came the 1960s, a time of great social change, a questioning of established norms, and a burgeoning interest in the unexplained, the paranormal, and, yes, unidentified flying objects, UFOs. It was in this fertile ground of new ideas that Watkins's ley lines found a new champion, a man named Tony Wedd. Wedd, a former RAF pilot, took Watkins' concept and launched it into an entirely different dimension. Quite literally, some might say. Wedd revived the theory, but with a significant twist. He wasn't primarily interested in ancient traders hauling goods across the landscape. No. In his 1969 book, Skyways and Landmarks, Wedd proposed something far more radical. He suggested that these ley lines were not just terrestrial pathways. He believed they were navigational aids for extraterrestrial visitors. Yes, you heard that right. Wedd argued that these straight lines connecting ancient sites were essentially landing grids or flight paths for UFOs. Ancient humans, he posited, either built these sites in alignment to attract or guide these visitors, or perhaps the visitors themselves influenced their placement. This marked a dramatic shift in the interpretation of ley lines. What Watkins had conceived as a practical system for human travel was now being reimagined as a communication network with beings from other worlds. Wedd suggested that ancient humans might have used these lines to communicate with aliens, or that the lines themselves somehow facilitated UFO activity. The focus moved from the practicalities of prehistoric trade to the far more speculative realms of ancient astronaut theory. Suddenly, ley lines weren't just about old mounds and trackways. They were about cosmic connections and advanced alien technology guiding spacecraft to Earth. Wedd's ideas captured the public imagination in a way that Watkins's more sober theories perhaps never could. The 1960s and 70s were a peak time for UFO sightings and theories about ancient astronauts. Authors like Erich von Däniken were popularizing the idea that aliens had visited Earth in antiquity and influenced human civilization. Wedd's interpretation of ley lines fitted perfectly into this narrative. The ancient sites, the mysterious alignments, could they all be part of a vast global system designed for, or by, extraterrestrial intelligence? The question was no longer just about how ancient Britons navigated, but about humanity's place in a much larger cosmic neighborhood. From tracks to energy. The mystical transformation. The introduction of UFOs by Tony Wedd was just the beginning of the mystical transformation of ley lines. As the theory evolved beyond Watkins' original concept of trade routes, it began to incorporate ideas of earth energies, spiritual power, and consciousness. The focus shifted from the physical lines themselves to what might be flowing along them, or what might be concentrated at the points where they intersected. It wasn't just about aliens guiding their craft anymore. It was about the very life force of the planet. Could ancient people have been sensitive to energies that modern science is only now beginning to explore, or perhaps has forgotten entirely? The theory developed further, positing that ancient humans didn't just randomly build their sacred structures. No, they carefully selected specific locations. Locations where they felt strong, perhaps even palpable, supernatural or terrestrial energy. These places, stone circles, burial mounds, holy wells, were seen as power spots. And the ley lines. They were thought to connect these power spots, acting as conduits or channels for this mysterious energy. Imagine invisible rivers of energy crisscrossing the globe, with ancient monuments acting as acupuncture needles for the earth, tapping into and harmonizing these flows. This mystical interpretation suggested that the lines themselves carried a special kind of energy, sometimes called earth energy, telluric currents, or even orgony energy, borrowing from Wilhelm Reich's controversial theories. It was believed that this energy could be detected by dowsers using divining rods or pendulums. Furthermore, it was proposed that this energy could have profound effects on human consciousness, health, and spiritual well-being. Certain individuals, the theory went, particularly those with heightened sensitivity, could feel this energy, or perhaps even see the lines. The exact evolution from practical trade routes to these paranormal paths is somewhat hazy, a gradual merging of different esoteric ideas. This new understanding of ley lines resonated deeply with the burgeoning New Age movement of the late 20th century. It offered a vision of an interconnected world, imbued with subtle energies that our ancestors understood and worked with. Ancient monuments were no longer just historical artifacts. They were active spiritual centers, still pulsing with power. The idea that one could visit these sites, walk these lines, and tap into this ancient energy was incredibly appealing. It transformed ley lines from a purely archaeological or ufological mystery into a personal spiritual quest for many. The lines were no longer just on maps. They were within us, and within the living earth. The allure of the unseen, sacred sites and subtle forces. The shift towards a mystical understanding of ley lines brought with it a profound re-evaluation of ancient sacred sites. Places like Stonehenge, Glastonbury Tor, Avebury, and countless other megalithic structures around the world were now seen not merely as accomplishments of ancient engineering or astronomical observatories, but as sophisticated instruments designed to interact with subtle earth energies. Could it be that their precise placement and alignment were not accidental, but part of a global network of energetic significance? Proponents believed that these sites were deliberately positioned at the nexuses of ley lines, points where the Earth's energy was particularly strong or could be easily accessed. This interpretation suggested that ancient peoples possessed a deep, intuitive wisdom, a connection to the natural world that modern society has largely lost. They weren't just building tombs or temples, they were creating sacred spaces that resonated with the Earth's own rhythms and energies. The idea took hold that these energies could influence everything from crop fertility to human health and spiritual enlightenment. Pilgrimages to these sites became popular, not just for their historical interest, but for the potential to experience these subtle forces firsthand. People would meditate, perform rituals, or simply sit quietly, hoping to connect with the ancient power believed to be concentrated there. The theory also proposed that these lines of energy were not confined to Britain, but formed a global grid, connecting sacred sites across continents. The dragon lines of China, Feng Shui, the spirit lines of the Aboriginal Australians, the Nazca lines in Peru. Could all these be different cultural expressions of the same underlying phenomenon? A planetary energy system, understood and utilized by diverse ancient cultures worldwide. This grand, unifying vision was incredibly compelling. It suggested a shared ancient wisdom, a common understanding of the subtle forces that shape our world, hinting at a forgotten golden age of spiritual and technological harmony. Furthermore, the belief grew that this energy was not static. It could be influenced, enhanced, or even disrupted by human activity. The construction of modern roads, buildings, or power lines over these ancient pathways was sometimes seen as detrimental, potentially blocking or scrambling the natural energy flow. Conversely, it was thought that conscious interaction with these lines and sites could have beneficial effects, both for individuals and for the planet as a whole. The allure of ley lines, therefore, became deeply intertwined with a desire to rediscover this lost knowledge and to live in greater harmony with the Earth and its subtle, unseen dimensions. The mystery deepened, inviting exploration not just of the outer landscape, but of inner perception too. Lines of Chance. Williamson and Bellamy investigate. While the mystical interpretations of ley lines captured the public imagination, the academic world remained largely skeptical. As the theories grew more elaborate, involving global energy grids and extraterrestrial guidance systems, the need for rigorous scientific investigation became more apparent. In the 1980s, two scholars, Tom Williamson and Liz Bellamy, decided to take a closer look at the fundamental premise of ley lines, the very existence of statistically significant alignments of ancient sites. They approached the question not with a belief in mystical energies, but with the tools of archaeology, statistics, and cartography. Their findings would prove to be a significant challenge to the ley line phenomenon. Williamson and Bellamy undertook a systematic study. They examined maps of various regions in England, meticulously plotting the locations of archaeological sites, just as Alfred Watkins had done, but with a critical, analytical eye. Their central question was this: given the sheer number of ancient sites scattered across the British landscape, how likely is it that one could find straight lines connecting several of them purely by chance? Think about it. If you have hundreds, or even thousands, of points on a map, the probability of finding some that align, especially if you allow for a certain width or tolerance for the line, might be higher than one would intuitively think. Their research, published in books like Ley Lines in Question, concluded that the density of archaeological sites in many parts of Britain is so high that it is indeed possible to draw straight lines connecting multiple locations in almost any direction, simply by chance. They argued that one could essentially take a ruler and a map, and with a bit of patience, discover ley lines almost anywhere. This suggested that the patterns Watkins and others had identified might not be evidence of intentional design by ancient peoples, but rather a product of statistical probability and the human tendency to find patterns, even in random data, a phenomenon known as apophenia. Williamson and Bellamy's work implied that anyone could create such a map of alignments and then claim spiritual or historical significance for it. This didn't necessarily disprove the existence of specific, intentional alignments that might have had local importance, but it cast serious doubt on the idea of a vast, interconnected system of ley lines as envisioned by Watkins, and certainly on the more esoteric interpretations. Their research suggested that the burden of proof lay with the proponents of ley lines to demonstrate that the alignments they found were, statistically, improbable, and could not be explained by chance alone. This statistical critique became a major hurdle for the ley line theory within academic circles. Ley lines. Today. Between belief and disbelief. So, where do ley lines stand today, in the 21st century, 100 years after Alfred Watkins first peered at his map on that Herefordshire hill? The concept remains fascinating, but it exists in a curious space between widespread popular belief and continued academic skepticism. For many people, ley lines are very real. They are invisible pathways of energy crisscrossing the globe, connecting sacred sites and influencing the world in subtle yet profound ways. These believers often engage in practices like dowsing to detect these lines, or make pilgrimages to sites believed to lie on powerful ley intersections. For these individuals, the experience of visiting ancient sites, the intuitive feelings they might get, or the apparent synchronicities they observe, all serve as personal confirmation of the reality of ley lines and earth energies. The idea that our ancestors were deeply attuned to these forces and built their monuments in accordance with them holds a powerful appeal. It offers a connection to a more spiritual, less materialistic past, and a hope for a future where humanity might once again live in harmony with the earth. The internet has allowed these communities of interest to flourish, sharing experiences, maps, and interpretations of ley phenomena across the world. On the other hand, mainstream archaeology and science largely dismiss the paranormal or mystical aspects of ley lines. The arguments put forth by Williamson and Bellamy regarding the statistical likelihood of chance alignments still hold considerable weight in academic circles. Most archaeologists see ancient sites as products of their specific historical, social, and environmental contexts, rather than nodes in a global energy grid. The lack of repeatable empirical evidence for Earth energy that can be measured by conventional scientific instruments remains a significant barrier to wider acceptance. For many scientists, ley lines are a fascinating example of folklore or pseudoscience, but not a verifiable reality. Despite this skepticism, the allure of ley lines persists. Perhaps it's because they tap into a deep human desire to find meaning and connection in the landscape, to believe that there is more to the world than meets the eye. The mystery of ancient monuments, their purpose often shrouded in time, provides fertile ground for such theories. So, today, you have a spectrum, from those who believe individuals can harness supernatural power at ley line intersections, to those who see it all as wishful thinking or misinterpretation. The debate, much like the lines themselves, continues to stretch across our understanding of the past and our place in the universe. The enduring enigma. Why ley lines still fascinate? Why, after a century of debate, do ley lines continue to captivate the imagination of so many? What is it about these invisible lines that hold such enduring power? I believe it is because they touch upon some of the most fundamental questions we ask ourselves. Questions about our ancestors, their wisdom, their connection to the cosmos, and the very nature of reality itself. Alfred Watkins began with a simple observation, a pattern on a map. He saw ancient tracks, a practical system. But the idea quickly grew, evolving into something far grander, far more mysterious. Could it be that the initial, simple observation was just the tip of an enormous, unseen iceberg of ancient knowledge? The journey of the ley line concept, from trade routes to UFO guidance systems to conduits of mystical earth energy, reflects our own evolving understanding, or perhaps our evolving desires, about the past. Each interpretation tells us as much about the era in which it emerged as it does about ancient Britain. The pragmatic early 20th century saw trade routes. The space age 1960s saw alien runways. The new age late 20th century saw energy grids. What does this tell us? It tells us that humans are pattern-seeking creatures, always looking for meaning, for connection, for evidence that we are part of something larger than ourselves. The skepticism of scholars like Williamson and Bellamy provides a necessary counterbalance, reminding us to critically examine evidence and to be wary of seeing patterns where none exist. Yet, even if many ley lines can be explained by chance, does that negate the possibility that some alignments were intentional? Does it dismiss the very real experiences people report at ancient sites? Or the possibility that our ancestors possessed knowledge and sensitivities that modern science has yet to fully grasp or appreciate? These are the questions that keep the enigma alive. The lack of definitive proof, one way or the other, for the more esoteric claims, only adds to the mystery. Ultimately, ley lines represent a fascinating intersection of archaeology, folklore, spirituality, and pseudoscience. They challenge us to think about how we interpret the past, how we understand the landscape, and how we define knowledge. Whether they are ancient maps, mystical paths, or simply tricks of perception and probability, their story is a testament to the human quest for understanding and our enduring fascination with the secrets that may lie hidden just beneath the surface of the everyday world, or perhaps far beyond it, among the stars. The truth, as they say, is out there. And perhaps, just perhaps, it is aligned.